Recording in progress.
This is a reading from the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy. Listen, Israel. The Lord our God is the one Lord. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. The words that I command to you today shall stay in your heart. You shall recite them to your children and speak of them when you are sitting at home, when you are walking on the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. You shall fasten them on your hand as a sign and on your forehead as a headband. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. In the past few weeks, I've been thinking a lot about a story I read once, although I'm not quite sure why I'm thinking of this story exactly. It's a story I read long ago. And I'm pretty sure that it comes from some religious tradition, probably Taoism. Although I can't say that I understand the significance of the story within whatever tradition it came from. Though it seems significant to me for my tradition, and or at least for my life. In the story, there's a very wealthy man who wants to learn about jade, the stone, from the leading expert on jade. I have no idea what kind of currency was in vogue in the place or time where this story comes from, so I'm just going to translate it into dollars. And he goes to the guy who knows about jade and says, I want to pay you to teach me what you know about jade. And the jade guru says, I'm really not interested. I don't want to teach you about jade. And the rich man said, but I really want to learn about jade. I want to start collecting jade and I want to understand it. And people tell me that you know more about jade than any other living person. And I want to learn from you all there is to know about jade. And the guru says, I just have no interest in giving you lessons on jade. It's taken me a long time to acquire this knowledge, and I'd rather sit and admire my jade than teach you about it. And I suspect in the story that part of his disinterest in teaching the rich man is that he doesn't believe the rich man will commit to actually learning about jade. And so this dialogue goes on for some time, and every day the rich man comes to his door and, Pastor, please teach me about jade. I'll pay you whatever you want. And finally, just to get this pestering to stop, the jade expert says, okay, you can pay me $10,000 per lesson and come every week and for an hour, and you will learn about jade. So he comes the first week, a servant shoots him into a room, and he pays the $10,000 and sits down at the table, and the servant says, the master has put some stones on the table and leaves him, and the rich man sits there for an hour, and then the servant shows him out. And he's a little bit miffed, but he knows that this guy is doing him a favor to teach him at all, and so he can't complain too much, and he comes the next week and pays his $10,000. He gets shown to a room, and there are some other stones on the table, and he starts to look at them, picks them up, examines them. An hour passes. The servant shows him out, and this goes on for weeks and weeks, and he gets more and more irritated. He's paying really good money for these supposed lessons in jade, and absolutely nothing is happening. He goes to this room, he looks at some stones, and then he's shown out. And finally, the 6th month arrives, and the servant shows him to the room, and he sits down at the table, and then he leaps up and he says, "I've had enough of this charade. I'm paying good money. I've never seen a master, and now you have the gall to sit me down at a table where there aren't even stones made of jade. These are not jade." And that's the point. Now he knows what jade is. And I almost think about that story because I wonder how we learn things, really. It seems to me that in Quakerism, there is a lot of the expectation that if we just show up and sit down the jade, so to speak, people will learn what we need. We don't talk about it. But I also think that if that's the way that we're going to transmit knowledge, we have to make sure that we're actually showing the stone, so to speak, that people have an example that they can see. And since it is so hard to be that example, I think sometimes we prefer to say something. But I also think another meaning of the story is that if you give something enough time and enough attention, time and attention itself might lead to intimacy and to love. In my mind, this story goes alongside a story from one of the Hasidic masters from the 1600s or 1700s, and I can't remember his name right now. But surprisingly, for a lot of people who lived in the Ukraine, a number of the Hasidic Jewish teachers were able to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem at some point in their life. And this particular rabbi came back from Israel and said to his disciples, "This is what I learned in the land of Israel. It now seems to me to be a sign of the presence of God when I look out the window and see a bundle of straw that has fallen in the street, and it lies crosswise rather than parallel." And what he was saying was that his ability to sense the presence of God in the Holy Land was so revelatory and so transformative that the entire world now speaks to him of God's presence. The passage with which I began today, Deuteronomy 6:4-9, is known to Jews as the Shema. It is the fundamental prayer and the fundamental confession of faith of all Jews, actually, not just Orthodox or Hasidic Jews. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And verses 4-9 are the daily prayer of Jews, the Shema, which they say every day. And it's what a portion of what Jesus was quoting when asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Your heart, your soul, your strength comes from the Shema. Your neighbor as yourself comes from the prophets, and that's why he says, or one of the reasons why he says, in this consists all of the law and all of the prophets. I wonder how we would respond to the world if we had some way of sitting down and examining the jade, as it were. Some particular way every day of looking for God somewhere, of finding God. How it would affect our lives. If we came to have such great intimacy with God from having looked for him every day, that we could now see God every day. Thinking about that fear of the mentally ill, fear of addicted persons, fear of the poor, the poverty-stricken. If we were able to see a sign of God in a fallen bundle of straw, would we be able to have that fear? If we were able to see God in a fallen bundle of straw, we could certainly see God in our neighbors who suffer. And if we saw God there, could we still be afraid of them? And there are really kind of two parts to that question. One is, what do I need to do in my life? What kind of attention do I need to pay and where to increase my awareness of God's presence so that I see God's face in my neighbors who suffer? And the other question is, and this, I think, is one where we tend to feel completely helpless except for prayer. How can I begin to address the fear in my neighbors who cannot see God's presence anywhere. That's probably not a question just for each of us as individuals, but for all of us as a community of faith. It has to start with our own fearlessness, because we see the face of Christ in our neighbors who suffer. But how we can spread that fearlessness is a matter, I think, for individual prayer and for community discernment. But it all has to start with our ability to see the entire creation alive with the presence of God.